thank you to all of you guys who are here today. As I told the dean on the front end, anytime I get to come be on campus and spend some time with students, it's a great day for me. So I'm excited to be here with you today. The dean shared a little bit about my background. I'll share just a little bit more with you just so I can kind of set the stage for why I'm here today. So I went to the U of A, graduated in 2003, started my career with General Mills 17 years ago. Not ever thinking, always having a vision for myself, but not ever thinking I would be the first African-American female sales director at my company. And as I reflect back, there's a lot of people that helped me to get to this point. And my goal here today is just really to help you. Hopefully I can shed a little light on how you can build your badass brand so that you don't have to learn everything the hard way. So if you come in with the mindset of knowing some things to be doing early on to build your brand, hopefully you can get to where I am in half the time. Well, let's see if this clicker will work for me. There we go. All right, so building your badass brand. One, I thought that title is probably something that'll get folks to show up, so I think that worked. We have more than 5 people in the room, and even a few of my coworkers showed up today. But I really wanted you guys to start to think about right now, how do you build your badass brand? You don't have to wait until you're 30 or 40 or 50 to start to develop your brand. And so what I'm gonna do today, there's 2 things. Number one, this is really a talk that I give to all the new hires as they make their way through my office in their first probably month on the job. And I figured, what can I do to bring this all together so I can share it with all of you guys who are gonna be starting your careers here soon. And then the second piece is, how can I drop some of these data points on you so you can learn early? So when you walk into your job on the first day, you know some things that you need to be working on. So I'm gonna cover 4 things with you today. Number 1, leverage your talents and strengths. Number 2, try it all. Number 3, find your confidence. And number 4, and most importantly, you have to have a vision for yourself. So I'm gonna tick through each one of these. It might take me 7 clicks to get there. There we go. Number 1, know your strengths and talents. You would be surprised how many working professionals, if I were to ask you, what are you good at, can't easily answer that question. And so I want you to think about today, you're not here because you were just some average Joe. I know the standards have gotten higher and higher in order to get into the U of A since I was here. But what makes you special? What makes you special today? I need you all to think about that. And I want you to write down the 3 things that you're uniquely good at today. I'll give you some ideas here in a second, but I want you to pause on that because that's not gonna change that much as you start to become a working professional. So think about what you do well. I think the sweet spot is find the things you enjoy and the things that you're good at, and that intersection is really what's gonna accelerate you. But once you can articulate what you're good at, that becomes the foundation for your brand. And so I'm gonna share an example here in a second of one of the new hires that I work with, and one of the really special strengths that he brings to our team. But once you identify what your strengths are, you've gotta be comfortable embracing those and telling other people what those are. And then lastly, how do you maximize those? And I'd encourage anybody, don't just focus on your weaknesses, but play with your strengths. So many times we're focused on what we're not good at, that we're not taking the time to really accelerate by the things that we're naturally good at. So again, don't focus on your weaknesses. How do you play with your strengths? I'm gonna use myself as an example first. And the things in green above the line are the things I came to college with. The pieces of my brand that were already starting to be defined by the things that I was good at and the things that I like to do. And so leadership was a big one. For me, I love to be involved. I love kind of being the lead. I was the president of my class all 3 years. And you know what, when I started college, I didn't just stop being a leader. When you start working, you won't just stop being a leader or whatever that thing is that you're good at. The things below the line are things that I learned or got good at as a working professional. And so I'm going to talk you through some steps here in a second too, because some people really may not have a clue what they're good at. So I'm going to help you to identify some steps so you can figure out what that is. Let me tell you about Mr. Personality. This is a real person. I just didn't want to call him out because he just graduated, so some of you guys might actually know this person. He works for my company. He's been there 7 or 8 months. I met him on campus a few times before we actually hired him, and he has a huge personality. It is big. And the way that translates to the work environment is he's very warm. He's very authentic. He creates an environment that you want to be around him. He's not on my team, but I make it a point a couple times a week to walk to the other side of the office and engage with him because he makes me feel special. He makes me feel valued. He makes me laugh. But really what that translates to in our environment is he's a culture driver. At 22 years old, he is making a difference in my office because he creates an environment where people want to be there. So I want you to think about that. Are you a culture driver? Are you an analytical guru? Are you a leader? What is the thing that makes you extra special? And some of you are sitting here and you've been going through 5 minutes. Oh, I can't think of anything. Or I can think of 2, but I think I need a couple more. So I want to give you some ideas in terms of how do you figure out what your strengths are? What if you don't know them? Number 1, ask for feedback. So where do I ask for feedback? You guys work in groups all the time. So how might you ask your group members for feedback? What about the professors that you have a close working relationship with? Don't just ask any professor. Don't ask the professor when you're sitting in the back and you don't engage, because I guarantee you that person has a vision of your brand, but it's probably not very positive, right? Think about, some of you guys have part-time jobs. Ask your manager, what is the thing that I bring that's unique to this job? Or what are some of my strengths? And then lastly, ask your brothers and sisters, ask your parents, ask your mentors. I want to give you some ideas because you need a broad set of inputs. And then what you do with that is you start to look for the common themes. And that's going to be the same thing when you start working. Part of the reason I named this Building Your Badass Brand is I have this coworker, and she's a badass, and I'm a badass too. And that's the way we communicate. When I'm doing something great, she'll say, "You're such a badass," and she does the hashtag badass. And when I hear that a few times, I just got a text from my coworker, "Ebony, I just want to know how much we appreciate you." And I said, "That's great, because I'm about to give a presentation. I need that little pick-me-up." And he was like, "You're such a boss." I'm telling you that because you paint the picture of what people know about your brand. I didn't just become that. I had to work hard at that, but it had to be consistent too. So once you get all these inputs, pick the 3 or 4 things that you like, because some of those things is like, I don't really think I'm that good at it. And so if I can't walk in confidence in that, I might kind of put that one in the back seat for now. But then start to summarize yourself. And you're going to see here in a second, I'm going to show you my full profile of how I identify my brand, because it's so important, not just what others think, but how do you take that and how do you project that back into the world? The second piece, especially at this point in your college career and as you start to embark on your early career journey, you have to try it all and see what sticks. I can't try it all today. I have 3 kids, I'm a wife, I work. I can't do it all. I'm very strategic in what I choose to do, but I know what I like to do. But for you guys, you have a lot more capacity than even what you know. So I'll share with you an example. When I was about 3 years out of college, it wasn't Dean Waller at the time, but it was someone in the dean's office that asked me to be on this alumni advisory board. I had no idea what that meant, what that would look like years later, but I said yes. And now, I've probably been on the board for about 12 years. Now I'm the chair of that board. And that's important because I just said yes. I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know the impact I would have. I didn't know the impact that board would have to me and my professional career. But I just said yes. So I want you guys to think about trying new things. You're going to try new things in the workplace. You're going to volunteer. You're going to go figure out what nonprofit, what passion areas you have, but you have to try new things. The reason why is doing the basics aren't enough. Just doing the basics of your job description won't get you promoted. It might keep you in the job for a little bit, but it probably won't get you promoted. You've got to figure out a way to find your passions and showcase leadership. And your journey won't look like mine. We might like very different things. So that's important for you to try it all and figure out what works for you. And then the last piece is you have to take some risks to build your skills. So raise your hand, take the stretch assignment. I moved here 3 months after coming back from maternity leave. I had a new baby, I had 2 more kids at home, and I knew my husband was probably not a super fan of moving again. So I moved 7 times, 4 years as a married person. But I knew that taking this job on a customer like Walmart and leading on a business this size was really important to building my professional brand. And so think about that. You don't have to wait until you're 15, 16, 17 years in. You have an opportunity to try some new things right out of college. You have opportunities to try new things right now to figure out what you're good at. How do you build on the strengths where this is where I naturally do well. What's next? What's the next layer for your brand? The third piece is you have to find your confidence. And for me to be here in front of you today is a really big deal because I probably didn't find my ultimate confidence until about 5 years ago. And being up here today, guess what I'm doing? I'm building my brand. I want to be a public speaker, that's important to me, but I can't just show up and think I'm going to be good at it. What a great audience to try it in front of. You guys are smiling, you're young, you're giving me good looks, you're smiling, you're laughing at my jokes. I can try some new things with you guys. But I couldn't do this 5 years ago because I wasn't confident in what I brought to the table. And so I tell you that because you have to figure out a way to get confident in your work early, to get confidence in your abilities early, because we've all been there when we're presenting for that group project, and we know we're halfway prepared, and we know that feeling of, oh my, I know he's gonna ask me this question, and I really don't know. You show up so much better when you are confident. And so this is the toughest one, I think, out of all 4, because confidence is a game in your head. And you've got to figure out what helps you get to confidence, Diego, is very different than what might help me. Diego might have to practice this pitch 10 times. And for me, I need to write it down 1 time, practice once, and I'm done. But everybody's journey looks different. And you all know where you are on the confidence spectrum. And it'll change over time. I guarantee when I got to this job, it was hard. I had no idea. I had no gut for the work. I was figuring it out. But 18 months later, I've got a good sense for the work I'm doing. I know my business, I know my people, but it took time. So I want you to know this is gonna be a journey. Your job is to figure out how do you get confident quickly. When you're in your first job, how do you get confident in 3 months versus 6 months? When you're running a $1 billion business, how do you get confidence in 9 months versus 12 months? That's what you're looking to do. This is the hardest one. Figure out what it takes for you. Sometimes it's a mentor. Sometimes it's practicing. Sometimes it's extra classes. Sometimes it's bouncing an idea off a buddy or a peer. But it's gonna look very different for each and every one of you. The fourth one and final point is you have to have a vision for yourself. Some sort of dreams and goals. Everybody's looks different. I don't have mine written down, but it's up here and I've articulated it to the people who need to know. I'll show you here in a second. A vision provides inspiration. If I'm just doing this to be a director of sales, like that's not what inspires me. I want to lead the whole business unit. The other piece is there's so many options out there that you need some way to guide yourself. I say try it all, that's only to a point, right? But you have to have some sort of roadmap in terms of where you're trying to go. And what I want you guys to know is I ask this question in pretty much all of my interviews. The question might sound a little bit like this: where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Or what are your long-term goals? If you can't answer that question, we've got a problem. So I'd encourage you to get really clear, even now, what are your goals? And what I want you to know, and this is where so many of you guys get caught up, is you don't have to have it all figured out. I did not know that majoring in finance that I would be working in sales. I was supposed to be some corporate attorney. That was my initial plan. But my current plan is something very different. I want you guys to know just because you're majoring in supply chain doesn't mean you can't do an internship in finance. That's where sometimes we can get caught up in having to feel like we need to be so specific. Sometimes you need to be specific and other times you don't. You just need to have a plan. This is my brand. This is Ebony with the red lipstick. This is Ebony, mom, wife, boss. And I lead with that because I want young women to know that you can have it all. It's important for me to be a mom, to be a wife, and to run a business. So that's what I lead with. You'll see that hashtag often, especially my coworkers who work with me. I want people to know that I care about the people around me. That is a part of my brand, and it's important that I lead that way. I want people to know that I run a big business. I run a big-ass business, and that I can lead all kinds of teams. And not just diversity in the sense of the way we might think about it, but I've managed teams who are continuity. They've done this job for a long time. They know exactly what they're doing, and I'm just there to help them influence. I've ran teams that are all very young in their career, and I have to provide a lot more guidance to them. That has to be important to somebody, though, in order for me to have it here as part of my brand. The other pieces, I lead through authenticity and transparency, and sometimes that's a scary place because I am open. I'm an open book, and there's not too many things I won't share with you. But I found that that's important to the people around me, and that is a value-added thing that I bring to the table. I love to connect. I love to meet new people. I love to be a champion for diversity and inclusion, and I don't shy away from that. Me and my boss, who is a white male, we had a conversation about this today, and we probably have a conversation once a week because he knows it's important to me, and he knows that I have a point of view that might be different than his, but he wants to understand it as he works to be a better leader. I'm resilient, I'm agile, and I'm purposeful. I don't do anything by accident. I don't say yes to everything I'm asked to do. For example, as I've been kind of working this public speaking circuit, everything I've done so far has been free. And it's been what I have said yes to. I've been choiceful about that. But about a year ago, somebody reached out and said, hey, we're having a sales meeting. We hear you're a great speaker. I'd love for you to come talk to my team about motivating them to sell more stuff. I was like, that's great. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate you thinking about me, but that's not quite my topic. And so at some point, when you try it all, you've got to narrow it in, right? And if it's not a thing that if they would have asked me to come in here and talk about, let me think of something, HR strategy or something that I'm just like, that's not my thing. I don't feel compelled to say yes if it's not an area of strength. And then what's new? Why did I put this on here? I want you to know that I've got high capacity and I'm constantly reinventing myself. So I founded a multicultural mamas network. There's 840 members here in Northwest Arkansas out of a need that I had when I moved back here, out of a need to connect with multicultural mothers like myself. My network looked very different when I moved here. And so it was really out of a place of loneliness for me, but it ended up being such a safe space for so many women. As Dean Waller mentioned, I'm chair of his advisory council. And that's important to me because over time, it has allowed me a safe space to practice these skills, to share ideas in an environment that's not General Mills, or that's not the General Mills Black Champions Network. New environment, people from all different walks of life in different industries. It's intentional. I don't do things by accident. And then lastly, I'm doing things and achieving a level of greatness. I'm not just doing it to do it. If I'm not making an impact, I don't want to do it. And so I just encourage you, I didn't start with this mindset right out of college. I was always a go-getter. I knew I wanted to be successful, but I didn't have a well-defined plan, a well-defined what I wanted my brand to stand for. But I'm not that different than who I was back then. And then I put a goal on here. I usually don't have this goal on, but I did it for you guys to show vision. I'm gonna be an executive at some point. I've had to share that with my company's leadership so they know where I want to go and they can help me to fulfill that vision. And I want to impact not only the business, but the people. And so I was very intentional about what I put on here. So I share that not to say, man, I'm such a badass, but because I want you to think about what are the elements of your brand that you have today that make you stand out, and what is this going to look like 10 years from now? How have you worked over time to build a brand that's undeniable? People know when you show up, you're going to crush it. I want you to really think about that. Lastly, I had a few more points that didn't quite fit into my 4, so I wanted to share those with you. Number 1, you have to get support along the journey. Use mentors to help you refine and navigate new spaces. I was so rough around the edges when I came out of college. I grew up with my grandmother who worked in a factory. I didn't have parents who were corporate. I didn't even have mentors that were corporate. All of my mentors were educators. And when I tell you I needed a lot of refinement coming out of college, but it was my mentors that helped to say, okay, Ebony, this is working really well for you, but this piece probably, let's pull it back a little bit. And you have to find those mentors. And sometimes they will show themselves through an internship. The people set up coffee with me. They're not just setting up coffee with everybody. So how do you take the next step? I've got Oliver sitting here. Oliver and I are going to go to lunch within the next month. I didn't say that on accident. So Oliver, he owns the next step. What does he do to make sure that he develops that mentor relationship? So don't wait on the person with more experience to set it up. If you see something you like, you go ask them to be your mentor. The second piece is refine. Your brand is going to change along the way, and know that that is okay. Who you are at 22 and who you are at 32 and 42 and 52 will be very different. And know that that's okay. My one-pager is going to look very different 2 years from now when I'm a vice president, right? You got to speak it into existence. And lastly, I had a mentor who worked at General Mills and who is still, he doesn't work there anymore, but he's still a mentor to me. And he did this presentation, it was probably 8 or 9 years ago, and I just asked him for a copy of it, but he talked about creating raving fans, and I never forgot about that. You want your brand to be so undeniable that people talk about you when you're not in the room. I hope that Dean Waller is screaming my praises when I'm not here. But I've given him something to praise. That is my job as I build my brand. So what are you doing to create raving fans? If you're that student that just shows up and does what you need to do and you leave and you don't add any extra and you don't spend the time with your group members and you don't try new things and you never want to lead, I'm not sure people are going to be raving about what you bring to the table. But if you are that student that shows up, that looks the part, that's always prepared, that is ready to lead, that shows up for the Leadership Walton events, and every time that professor or that advisor asks you to do something, you're there, I bet you have some raving fans. So lastly, as I close, I want you to think about the key points. Leverage your strengths and talents. You have to know what they are, and you have to articulate those. Number 2, try it all and see what sticks. The third piece is find your confidence quickly. And lastly, you have to have a vision and a plan for yourself. I just encourage you all to go forward and build your badass brand. Thank you.